Hi guys, now it's time for me to post my part 3 of the Lactate Threshold Series. I apologize for how long this took me to make. I've been crazy busy between school and work, but I wanted to go ahead and get this video made so that I can give you guys a little bit more information and wrap up the topic of lactate threshold. So lactate threshold training is going to mostly benefit an endurance athlete, so that's going to be someone that competes in triathlons, distance running, and endurance cycling, that kind of an activity. What the training of lactate threshold does is it increases that lactate threshold of an athlete so they can therefore perform at a higher level. So let's say your lactate threshold happens at 60% of your VO2 max. With lactate threshold training, ideally that value will get raised hopefully as close to 100% as you can get it. If you're actually in a training regimen now and you want to know how to adapt your training regimen to improve lactate threshold, the first thing to do is to change the volume of training. So let's say you're a marathoner. You want to gradually increase the number of miles that you run by 10%. If you increase too fast, you might get injured, you might get overtrained, and overtraining has a lot of very negative benefits and will actually kind of put you out of competition. So we don't want that to happen. Once you've reached that goal volume, then you want to start steady state maximal training. What steady state maximal training is a training regimen where you're exercising at or near your lactate threshold for a sustained steady pace for a sustained amount of time. So your steady state is either at or just below the lactate threshold, and you keep that at a certain pace or a certain distance. So let's say you're at 10 miles, you keep that for the entire 10 miles. You want to use your levels of perceived exertion to determine your lactate threshold unless you have your VO2 max information. A lot of athletes will already know what their VO2 max is. They've been tested in a human performance lab. If you're just at a gym training yourself, you probably don't have that benefit. So what I would suggest is use the levels of perceived exertion to put yourself somewhere between somewhat hard and hard levels of exertion. That's where you want to be at for lactate threshold training. Lactate threshold training will also include interval training. You're going to do short, intense workouts that are way above your lactate threshold. So when you're doing longer duration, you want to work at or below your lactate threshold or just below lactate threshold. When you're working in a short duration, you want to go above that lactate threshold. So if you're doing training for a 5K, you would want to do like 3 1-mile runs above the normal running pace, and you want to give yourself rest periods between. Interval training is very important, has a big emphasis on time, so you need to have timed intervals and you need to have timed rest periods. How you divide those up depends on your coach, depends on yourself, depends on your own personal level of fitness. Between maximal steady state training and interval training, you should make up no more of 20% of your total training time. So you're not spending your entire training time training with those two things. Those are like little added bonuses to your training. So you still want to engage in your normal training regimen, but take about 20% of that and incorporate maximal steady state and interval training. Your lactate threshold is your most important component in endurance training. I can't specify that enough. Endurance training athletes need to have a high lactate threshold. They need to engage in lactate threshold training. You want to take into account your current fitness status, your age, your past injuries, your body mass, your goals, and your training time before you start implementing maximal steady state training and interval training to improve your lactate threshold. And honestly, I'm going to be honest with you, the best way to incorporate this type of training safely is to hire a trainer, because they can kind of work at that for you and work up the plan and periodize the training levels out and make sure that you're not exceeding 20% of total training time using lactate threshold training. And so that would be your best and safest way. If you can afford it and you can have the money to invest, you really want to hire a personal trainer. It will save you a lot of time and a lot of headache. All right, that completes our video on lactate threshold training. It's a 3-part series. I hope you enjoyed all 3 parts. I tried to make them as informative as possible. Tune in for the next blog post. Thanks, guys. Bye.